Bernie or bust isn't the main story, even in swing states. For whatever reason, some of my favorite political commentators from the 2016 presidential election cycle have not yet chosen to cover the Bernie or bust movement in the current election cycle. Last time around, the Political Action Committee Citizens Against Plutocracy began a powerful grassroots movement called Bernie or Bust that provided the opportunity for regular working class citizens to push back against the obvious rigging by the DNC. Voters were encouraged to take a pledge not to vote for any Democrat in the general election if Sanders was cheated out of the nomination. The Buster mantra went something like, "If the DNC fails to nominate Bernie Sanders in the Democratic National Convention, we will guarantee that you get Donald Trump in the general election." As it turns out, it wasn't an idle threat. In the crucial swing states, even though the Bernie or busters were not able alone to take credit for Hillary's defeat, Sanders supporters who voted directly for Donald Trump were. According to exit polls, there were enough Bernie or Trump voters in swing states to take credit for Hillary's defeat. 12% in this graph. In this election cycle, two different Emerson polls indicate that the number of Sanders supporters who will vote directly for Donald Trump in the general election if Sanders is not the Democratic nominee are even higher than last time. In the April poll, the poll also found that 21% of Sanders supporters said they would vote for Trump in the general election if Buttigieg won the primary. 26% said they would vote for Trump if Warren won the primary. 18% said they would vote for Trump if O'Rourke won the primary, and 17% said they would vote for Trump if Harris won the primary. These numbers indicate that Elizabeth Warren is perceived by a substantial number of Sanders supporters to be an establishment candidate. She was, after all, a superdelegate for Clinton, and she has received funding from sources friendly to the Clinton-controlled DNC. It's a quotation from "Here's wiki proof that the Clinton machine was behind the flood of new Democratic presidential hopefuls." Michael Kives, former agent and executive of Creative Artists Agency, CAA, is connected to the Clinton machine and has been a leader in the effort to groom Democratic presidential candidates to run against Bernie Sanders in the 2020 presidential election cycle. CAA donated almost $479,000 to candidates and PACs in 2018, including to Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Beto O'Rourke, all who received donations of $11,000 or higher. CAA represents all of Joe Biden's interests as well. From a very recent Emerson poll, when asked if they would definitely vote for their candidate or if they could change their mind, Sanders supporters are the most committed to their preferred candidate, as 71% of his supporters said they will definitely vote for him. 60% of Biden supporters, 46% of Warren supporters, and 31% of Buttigieg supporters said the same. When asked if they would support the Democratic nominee for president regardless if he or she was not their first choice in the primaries, the majority of respondents said they would. 68% said they were very likely, and 15% said they were somewhat likely. 93% of Buttigieg supporters reported that they were very likely to support the nominee, followed with 80% for Warren supporters and 77% of Biden supporters. The least likely to support the nominee of the top candidates were Sanders supporters, with only 61% reporting that they were very likely. If only 61% of Sanders voters are very likely to vote blue, that leaves 39% who fall in the range between somewhat likely and no way in hell. Given the solid data from the 2016 exit polls, that's more than enough evidence to make the case that Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg have no possible path to the presidency. Even though Blue Dog Democrats are loath to accept such evidence, it's true nonetheless. Therefore, whether or not we can agree that any Bernie supporters should be taking this hard-nosed position, there's not much that can be done to make them change their minds. According to a July 2018 Gallup poll, independent voters outnumber voters in both major political parties. In fact, it's not even close. According to Gallup's July poll, 41% of American voters identify as independent. 30% as Democrat, and 26% as Republican. Given that a majority of U.S. voters have no party affiliation, it will be a tough sell to persuade independent Sanders supporters to toe the party line. Take Kathy Copeland Patton's word for it. Kathy Copeland Patton is a political junkie and history buff, alternating between bouts of crankiness and wry amusement while bearing witness to the apocalypse. Come along. This is from a Medium article. Because we don't belong to your party. One more time. We don't belong to your party. If you want to win our votes, you'll have to provide a comprehensive, policy-driven platform geared toward bailing out working Americans instead of Wall Street. More importantly, you must put forth credible candidates with a proven track record of upholding said principles instead of the same neoliberal corporate hose. Bleeding that Trump is a dumbass isn't sufficient. Everyone knows that Donald Trump is a mouth-breathing cretin. The real issue is what is the Democratic Party going to do differently to win the independent progressive vote to unseat him? If we combine the hard-nosed Sanders supporters who vote in primary elections with poor and poorly educated voters who typically vote only in general elections, and then only if there's a candidate who seems likely to challenge the status quo, we come up with an insurmountable case that no establishment Democrat has a ghost of a chance to defeat Donald Trump. This potent combination of potential voters does not even take into account brand new voters and post-millennial voters who overwhelmingly favor Bernie over the other Democratic contenders. So why are my favorite pundits not all over this story? Tim Black, Jimmy Dore, Nico House, Lee Camp, and others converged at the 2016 Philadelphia Democratic Convention in Philadelphia, and openly stated that they were Bernie or bust. When Bernie supporters left the convention center and took to the streets, these commentators were there to share the story of revolution. For a great retelling of this story, check out the following documentary film narrated by Viggo Mortensen. It's Right Brain Studios, spelled W-R-I-T-E, if you want to find this on YouTube. And then here's an episode of the Bernie or Bust show that calls attention to this documentary film. What we see in these films or in segments of these films, is that major highways were blocked. Huge crowds were in the streets of Philadelphia. Many impromptu speeches were given. The fury and indignation was palpable. This is the story that mainstream media will never cover. This is the word that must be delivered to the American people before it's too late. For diehard Democrats who feel that the Bernie or bust movement is a form of sabotage, we must make it clear to them that there is only one possibility of escape. Sabotage or not, this dire situation can be avoided. The good news? Trump can be defeated. The bad news, for those favoring a real Democrat, only Bernie Sanders can defeat Trump. For whatever reason, this message has been extremely difficult to deliver in the current election cycle. This is the urgent message that leftist commentators and celebrities must be persuaded to deliver. We still have more than 2 months, but unless well-known commentators, celebrities are willing to admit culpability for another 4 years of Donald Trump, they must step up and deliver right away. Hashtag only Bernie beats Trump must become a point of undeniable fact before the primary voting begins. Not only that, but Sanders insiders also must make it clear to their base that Bernie or Trump voters are a force to be reckoned with. We do not expect the Bernie camp to give support or approval to this segment of his supporters, but they must warn everyone else of the undeniable influence of this voting bloc. Silence on this issue is not an ethical option. No less than in the time of Paul Revere, this warning must be delivered by anyone who is serious about defeating Donald Trump. Let's not lose sight of the facts. Number one, what's better than low employment? Low unemployment. Full employment via Bernie's federal jobs guarantee is better. What's better than health coverage for some? Single-payer Medicare for all is better. What's better than feeble attempts to work within the system to bring about economic and climate justice? What's better than prioritizing private prisons and the propensity of the military-industrial complex to engage in endless regime change wars at the expense of regular citizens? What's better than big bank bailouts and shoddy public education? What's better than crippling debt, including student loan debt? What's better than paying exorbitant prices for pharmaceutical products? What's better than mere platitudes and plans? This is what's better. Organizing the labor force to demand needed changes. Bernie intends to become organizer-in-chief and confront the plutocrats directly to force change to occur. On these issues, only Bernie is serious. On these issues, only Bernie beats Trump. All candidates have a certain amount of natural electoral leverage. In 2008, Clinton had 26% of Democratic support after party unity my ass. According to the November 2019 Emerson poll, Mayor Pete's leverage in the form of Democratic primary support is 7%, and Elizabeth Warren has 20%. Bernie's 37% makes him the most likely candidate to unite the blue team, especially after Joe Biden tanks, which I've said in other shows is inevitable. Sanders continues to hold a strong lead with younger voters in the primary. Among voters under 50, Sanders received 37% support, followed by Warren with 22%, Biden with 15%, and Yang with 7%. What about independents? So far, Bernie beats Trump in virtually every poll. Recent Real Clear polling is scary close, though. If Bernie is the nominee, he'll fragment the party the least. Plutocratic donors will back Trump, whether they're previously Democrats or Republicans, because he is less likely to institute real change for American workers than Bernie Sanders. The only antidote is massive canvassing to get the word out to disenfranchise potential voters that working-class people probably have only one shot in their lifetimes to avert economic and environmental disaster. If the economy does crash during the next year, Bernie's coattails would be the longest of all the Democratic candidates by far. This message must be delivered repeatedly and relentlessly to likely Democratic primary voters before their state's primary contests. Time is running out. Regular people sharing messages like this one on social media is probably the most effective way to overwhelm the hashtag Bernie blackout. That's all I got for you for now. Hope to see you on the Bernie or Bust television show.
Get on board the Bernie or Bust train. Come get on board the Bernie or Bust train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board